Hey everybody, I've got some more geometry to show you tonight. So we're going to start here with our grid. This is our flower of life grid that we're going to use on all these things. This is our layer. And so I've got some of these things in different layers. The first thing I want to show you again is the brain. And then, if you remember, I showed you the area of the lotus, and I'm going to show you why that area is considered the lotus, because there's our Egyptian lotus right there, and as you can see, it follows the exact same geometry. So that is the area of the lotus that we see right there. What we see actually in the trapezium and on the Nile Delta, though, is it comes up right here a little bit, but this area right here is the lotus. Now you know Horus was born in the petals of a blue lotus, and that would actually be referring to the pineal gland area. He was also born in the Nile Delta, and we know Busiris is related to that area. It's related to the pineal gland. But let's take a look at the geometry of the brain again. I think it's pretty amazing what we've got going on here. First of all, let's take a look at the cerebellum area. Cerebellum is pretty amazing here. So where it dips in right here, you can really see the geometry there on how it dips in. Right here is the middle of the flower, and you can see it spread out into smaller flowers right here, right where those branches would be, and you see that it opens up and follows these lines. If you take a look up here in the actual brain itself, the cerebrum area, you can also see the geometry following that area as well. This is our lotus area right here, and if you'll notice this circle right here, the back part of the corpus callosum follows along that circle right there. Take a look at the midbrain. The midbrain coming up right here, and you can see the geometry of the circles coming up along with the midbrain. Here's another thing I thought was pretty amazing. The optic nerve coming off right here. Let's take a look at the sacred geometry there. We can see that the sacred geometry actually forms that optic nerve that comes off of there right there. Also, if we take a look at the area of the thalamus, you can see it's encompassed in an eye right here. Let's turn that sacred geometry down just a little bit. So here's the arc coming up that follows the midbrain. Here's the eye that covers the thalamus. And if you look at the geometry right here, triangular geometry, and then the stem coming down follows that optic nerve just perfectly. Take a look at the corpus callosum right here, and you can see the geometry hugging the corpus callosum right here at the very end. And you can see the geometry that follows along in this area. You could see, I mean, you could actually just take the flower of life, knowing the geometry, and you could create a perfect brain with this thing. You can see the geometry in the pons and everything. Let's back out just a little bit. So that's the geometry of the brain. You can see it's hugged up against the side of this thing, and it is scaled out in order to meet the geometry that we see in here. And that's important because this is always the center area. It comes up into the lotus right here. The brain has to be stretched out far enough, and when I say stretched, I mean scaled, not stretched, so that its geometry is correct. Otherwise, if you don't have it large enough, it's not correct. For those of you who are not familiar with sacred geometry and have heard crazy things about sacred geometry from religious groups and stuff. Just to let you guys know, everything that you see in nature is constructed from flower of life and sacred geometry. Everything that you see. And we're going to see some of that more as we go on. And so here's our brain real quick, and we're going to see how this ties into everything. What I want to show you is, so the next thing we'll take a look at here is the trapezium area. If you'll notice, the Orion Nebula fits perfectly in here. Kind of weird that it fits so perfectly like it does, but here is the trapezium of the Orion Nebula right here, and you can see the geometry that we have in there. Now let's take a look, because the same geometry that I'm showing you here is the same geometry that's in the brain. So we take the brain on, we turn it off, and what we have here, like the thalamus, consists of an eye right here. You see this vesica piscis and the eye in the middle. Okay, then we have another vesica piscis right here, and then we have an eye right here, and in the middle of that eye that we see right there, in the middle of this eye right here, let's turn down, let's do this. So right in the middle of this eye that you see right here, this vesica piscis, is where the pineal gland is, and so this proves the geometry right down to the middle of the eye. So this right here, this pillar, this is the vortex, and if you take a look at the geometry of the trapezium, it's the same geometry that fits inside the area of where the pineal gland is. And so this trapezium area, just like what we have read in Kabbalah as far as the nebula goes, this represents Kether and this represents the pineal gland. This is the final point right here. So this is the thalamus in this eye. You can see that the center of the eye is right on the center of the thalamus, and the center of this eye is where the pineal gland is, and you can see how it fans out. Here's our lotus again, and you can see right in the middle of that lotus is the vortex, or the pineal gland area. So let's turn our brain off real quick. Here's the geometry inside the trapezium again. There's our vortex right in the center of that eye. So now let's turn on Egypt. You can see the geometry is the same, and the starting point right here is Memphis, is where it starts opening up. The hump up here at the top right is captured in the geometry as well. So if we take Egypt and turn it down, you'll see that it's right on top of the same place where the Orion Nebula is. The Orion Nebula has this little area that sticks up as well right here on the right, and so does Egypt. So these are copies of each other. And right in the middle of that eye, right there, we see the vortex. That's exactly where Busiris is. None of this is by mistake, folks. The Egyptians, they knew, with their pyramids, we know that they knew everything about the cosmos. They knew all kinds of information that they apparently should not have known, but we never give them enough credit. And they also knew a lot of things spiritually as well. And so here we have Egypt. This is the image of heaven right here, just like Hermes said, and the geometry proves it. So we'll turn off Egypt, and so now what I want to show you is I've got some geometry, some from some of those images that I've captured a while back, from the paintings that we find in the churches. The first one I want to take a look at would be this guy. And if we take a look at the geometry with him, notice how Jesus is always in this. First of all, let's take a look, because really the only begotten, according to Kabbalah and according to the research and what I'm finding and everything, the first man, the first heavenly Adam, that's the same thing as Christ. It's the same thing as what we call the cosmic Christ. But cosmic Christ kind of sits right in the middle of that vortex as Ein Sof, Ein Sof R, limitless light. So right here we see, if you notice the way this thing is shaped, it has the same geometry as the trapezium. And notice where the light is, where the brightest part is. And so we'll just knock down that flower of life geometry just a little bit so we can still see it. And then we'll take this and you can see that that brightest area is exactly where the trapezium stars are. It comes up in a point right here, and that's the brightest area, and you'll see that it does the same thing in the painting. This triangle right here captures that brightest point. See? We'll back out just a little bit and take a look at it from afar. Now, the interesting thing about this is down here, where this comes out and back in, it's like the dip that goes in the side of the cerebellum on this larger brain that's the Orion Nebula right here. This is the trapezium, showing Jesus in the center of it, which would make sense because that would be where Ein Sof R emanates from. And so if we take a look at this area right here, let's take our flower of life geometry off so we can see it. And we'll take the clipboard and knock it down. And you can see the same dip coming in right here. We'll just zoom in on that real quick. So this same dip coming in right here is also in the painting. See? Some of this stuff is way too detailed for even geometry. The geometry just helps you give you focus on the area. But some of this stuff is so intricate that there's no way these people could have known it unless it comes from the collective unconscious. Look at this area right here too. You'll see that it matches up to this thing as well. And you can see that vortex is right on top of him. Okay, so that one's pretty good. Now let's check another one. This is the conversion of Saul by Michelangelo. So we'll turn on our geometry real quick. And there's our trapezium right here that he's hovering in. And here's the geometry. We'll just back out on that so you can see the geometry a little easier. Same area right here. And obviously we've seen the same area in the Orion Nebula. There's a couple things I want to point out to you though here that are interesting. So let's just back out real quick. You can see the whole thing. Move in just a little bit. So there's our trapezium. So there we go, there's our whole thing. Now there's a couple of things in here that are just really obvious when you take a look at it. Okay, this is all Orion Nebula right here. And you see this right here? This right here that is, and you see it coming up right here around all along this side of this guy. That is the guy standing to the right of the trapezium. I'll show you. And that's his butt right here. You can see it follows just right along his body and everything. And we want to check it with the flower of life. You can just kind of see where everything is as far as the lines go. You can see that it's located in the same place. So that's the Orion Nebula, and you can actually see this guy standing up right next to the trapezium. So if we back out to say 100%, and now we slide our so you can see the guy's same lines. Michelangelo did this, another one. This is 1542. That's when he did it. And so what we see here is we see this ray being shot down, and this ray being shot down is actually hitting Saul on the road to Damascus, him right down here. And so that's Ein Sof R, hitting him with a ray and basically causing enlightenment is what actually happens when that ray hits people. And so that's what's going on. So the geometry is the same. Same area. Same as this. So now I've got another one for you here real quick. And so we're going to take a look at this. This right here is the this is in the Church of the Jesu. And this is called Triumph of the Name of Jesus. And you can see IHS right in the middle here. Well, what this thing is right here that goes all the way around this and then curves and then comes back out right here. We have one that comes back out right here, and we have another one that curves in like this. Well, this right here is actually the Barnard's loop of the whole Orion constellation. So what we're looking at right here is we're looking at the Orion Nebula in the middle with Barnard's loop circling around, and then we have our belt stars right up here. And this area we'll be able to home in on. This right here, and this that you see right here we'll be taking a look at, because these help me line up, as well as the, if we want to take a look at the geometry real quick, you'll see that the arch of the canvas and the circles that come around it, and also if you take a look at, you can see where the geometry has been applied here. So we have these points right here. We have one on one end of the shell, one on the other. We have this arch that comes around here on the pane, and we have these lines up here following a circle going back up. So if we take our Flower of Life geometry and tone it down some, you can really see that. Right down here, we have this circle encasing this area. Turn this back up. And so let's take a look at the whole thing. And you can see that this whole thing pretty much covers the whole area of this circle. You can see the lines in the geometry as they make an S-curve and go along the same lines as what you see right here. So now let's take a look at, let's turn that off, and we'll take a look at the Orion constellation. This is the same area. And you can see that circle and that eye that covers the same area. And if we zoom in, you get a really good look at it. There's something that you might want to take a look to on this, is the Orion constellation. In these paintings, the gases and things like that are actually applied inside the painting. So you can see the way this comes out, and then you have this gas coming out over on the side. If you look at the whole overall structure of this thing, you can see how the gas comes back over on this side. Now you'll take a look at the painting. You see how it does the same thing where the gas comes out on that side over there, the yellow stuff. So the same area that we see there is what we see here. So let's take our Flower of Life geometry and turn it on real quick. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this. First of all, let's take a look at the whole thing. Let's knock our geometry up a little bit so we can see it. So you can see the geometry of the whole painting now and how it was applied. And then as we decrease our geometry, you'll see the Barnard's Loop, and you'll see the Orion Nebula exactly where it is. So now we can see that the geometry is the same. Now if we take a look at the Orion Nebula here and the Orion constellation, we have the same thing going on. We have the Barnard's Loop coming around right here. It comes up, it curves in, and curves back out right here. And it has another one that curves in. Now let's take a look at the painting's geometry. And you can see that it does the same thing. If we strap in our sacred geometry with that, you'll see that the Orion constellation does the same thing. Right here. Comes back in, back out. We have another one that comes in. So, here's our geometry. And if we take our flower of life off so we can see what's going on here, you can see how they cover a lot of areas. This is not covering just stars now, folks. This is covering the gases and stuff too. So let's take a look at a couple of things up here. Now that we know our geometry is locked in, I want to take a look at these two pieces right here. That's the orange area and the pink area. This is the Horsehead Nebula right here. Okay, so now let's take a look at the painting itself. And you see this orange area right here? And also this area right here. First of all, let's take a look at the orange area. And you'll see that that is in the same area. Now, I want to take a look at this thing right here, because that's actually the Horsehead Nebula right here. So that's the Horsehead Nebula that we see drawn right here. So let's take that down, and we'll see that the same thing is in the Orion constellation. So you can see the same thing is in there. And those kind of things help me line up on the painting. We'll back out just a little bit. And we'll take a look at the painting. You can see the orange area which sits above that Alnitak star. And you can see the Horsehead Nebula right underneath it, same areas. So there's with it on, there's with it off, same things. Now let's come down here to the nebula itself. look at the structure of this thing, and what we have here coming out, these gases coming out, we'll zoom in. Here's our geometry again, and that applies for the painting and for the nebula. If you'll notice, the very center point is right where the trapezium is, and that's how I was able to line up. So by lining up to that and lining up to those areas up at the top of the painting, as well as combining it with the sacred geometry of the actual painting, it's really not that difficult to put all this stuff together. So here we go. So if you look at the structure of the light part of these gases over here on the right, you'll notice that these stick out over here on the right and they don't so much over here on the left. So let's move that down. Let's turn this off. And there's our gases over here on the right. You can see it sticks out over here farther on the right. Here's the painting. And there's the nebula. And once again, we have Jesus pasted right on top of the nebula. IHS. So now if we take a look at the whole painting, you can see the Barnard's loop follows the same area as the clouds, comes back up. So here's the Orion constellation. So what I'm going to do, here's our geometry. And here's our geometry without it. Same thing. Multiple areas. This was done in 1679, at least over 200 years before the Barnard's loop was discovered and before they could see the area of the sky this way. The first telescope was invented in 1611. You guys take care. I'll talk to you soon.